All right, today we're going to get into something really heavy. We're going to break down the anatomy of Nigeria's economic collapse. It's an incredible story, really. A story about how a titan can rise and then just fall so devastatingly. So yeah, let's just dive right in. You know, it's a question you hear throughout history, right? Not just for, empires, but for entire economies. And that's really the big question for us today. How does a giant fall? How can a country that everyone's celebrating as this massive economic powerhouse just end up in such a tragic decline?
Okay, so to really get your head around the sheer scale of this, let's just start with one number. It's a brutal one, -50%. I mean, think about that. That's the drop in their GDP. The entire economic engine of a whole country just sliced in half. That's the kind of wreckage we're digging through here.
But look, to really understand a fall that big, you first have to see just how high they climbed, right? So before we get to the collapse, we've got to go back and look at Nigeria's story. Its incredibly rapid rise to the top.
And this title, Africa's biggest economy, that wasn't just some marketing slogan. It was real. We're talking about a super vibrant, fast-growing nation. Nigeria was a magnet for investment from all over the world. It was a hotbed for tech startups. You had headlines everywhere cheering on the rise of this African lion economy. The optimism, I mean, you could feel it. This was what it looked like from the very top.
But, and there's always a but in these stories, isn't there? Beneath that shiny, booming surface, something else was happening. A fatal flaw spreading like a disease, deep inside the very bones of the state. This was the rot from within.
The source material we're looking at has this really powerful term for it, institutional rot. And look, this isn't about, a few corrupt politicians. This is so much deeper. It's the systemic decay of the very things that are supposed to make a country work. The courts, the people running government services, the regulators. When all those things stop working for the public and start working for a few powerful people, well, the whole system just grinds to a halt with inefficiency.
And the difference is just it's night and day. On one hand, you've got what makes a healthy economy work. Predictable rules, contracts that mean something, and people actually trusting the system. But when that rot sets in, you get the complete opposite. You get arbitrary power, you get corruption just being the way things are done, and you get a public that has zero trust in its own government. This was the silent disease, spreading right under the surface of that amazing economy.
So what happens when you let a sickness like that just fester, when you don't treat it? The result? Well, it's a tragic and, honestly, an unavoidable decline. Let's watch how those dominoes started to tip over.
Yeah, this quote from the source, it just nails it. A post-mortem. That word tells you everything, doesn't it? It means something died. And in this case, what died was the hope for a stable, prosperous future. All of it, just undone by that decay from the inside. The rise was fast for sure, but man, the decline was just as dramatic. And here it is, in a picture. You remember that 50% number from the start? Well, here you can see it. Look at that massive bar for peak GDP, and then look what's next to it. That's the post-collapse GDP. It's such a stark, undeniable visual of just how much wealth, how much value was just wiped out.
So this didn't happen overnight. It was more like a four-stage system failure. It all started with festering corruption. I mean, just imagine this. Government payrolls filled with ghost workers, people who don't even exist. Or contracts for roads and buildings getting awarded for 3 times their real cost. The state was just constantly bleeding money. And that weakness led straight to phase 2, massive economic mismanagement. Because the institutions were broken, the people in charge made terrible, erratic decisions. Think disastrous currency rules that literally created a black market overnight, or fuel subsidies that just funneled billions of dollars to the wrong people. All of this obviously destroyed confidence. That's stage 3. Foreign investors could see what was happening and they got out. But here's the critical part. Nigeria's own people lost faith. They started moving their own money out of the country just to keep it safe. And that final loss of belief from within, that was the tipping point into stage 4, the collapse.
Okay, so now for maybe the most important part. What are the lessons here? What can we actually learn from breaking down this collapse?
The key thing to realize is that this wasn't random. It followed a really predictable and, frankly, a really dangerous pattern. Step 1, you have a booming economy that acts like camouflage, right? It hides all these deep cracks in the system. Then, step 2, under the surface, that rot we talked about just quietly eats away at the foundations. Step 3, because of that erosion, the whole structure becomes super fragile, totally vulnerable to any kind of shock. And that brings you to the final step, A fast, tragic decline that looks like it came from nowhere, but really, it was years in the making.
So, the takeaways here are pretty stark, and they really apply anywhere. First, you just cannot underestimate the danger of institutional rot. Second, you can't trust the headline numbers. Surface-level success can be so misleading. Third, when things finally break, the collapse can happen with terrifying speed. And I think the biggest lesson, the main takeaway, is this. The real strength of a country isn't just its GDP number. It's the health, the integrity of its institutions.
And that leaves us with one last, kind of provocative thought. It's really easy to look at this whole thing as just a case study, right? A tragedy that happened somewhere else to someone else. But the real question we have to ask is Nigeria's story a warning? A warning for all of us? Is it a cautionary tale about what happens when you let the foundations of a society decay, even when the building on top looks tall and shiny? It's definitely something to think about.